A man walks into a diner in Colorado. Three strangers are already waiting for him. They are tall, blonde, blue-eyed. They say they are not from here, not from this country, not from this planet. They say they are living quietly in small mountain towns, passing as Scandinavian. They say they have built families here, had children, had grandchildren, and those grandchildren have no idea what they are. They came to this man because they needed his help. The CIA, they said, was hunting them. And this man, a retired Army intelligence operative who had spent years as a psychic spy for the United States government, believed every word they said. That man is Lynn Buchanan. And the story he told next is why you're here.
This is Cryptic Accounts. By paranoid people. For paranoid people. Cryptic Accounts.
Welcome to Cryptic Accounts, a podcast by paranoid people for paranoid people. I'm Patrick Ryan. Thanks for being here. As always, hit the like, share, subscribe, hit the bell on YouTube so you know when new episodes come out. And as always, head over to crypticaccounts.com to connect with the show. The socials are there, as well as the forum, which is a more in-depth conversation where you can get involved. Join that. Post stuff, comment on stuff, discuss stuff. It's all there if you'd like to support the show as well. That can be done at crypticaccounts.com. We appreciate that very much. I appreciate it. And yeah, it's good to be back. Look at this. 3 weeks in a row back on schedule. This one's going to be a little bit late, but still getting better, getting back in the groove of things. Life's kind of evening out a bit where I can devote more time to this and looking forward to doing it. This was one that really caught my attention. I think if you've been listening for a while, this is one that's probably going to hit you too. So let's jump into it. In May of 2026, a philosopher named Jason Reza Georgiani went on a podcast called American Alchemy and dropped a claim that went viral within 48 hours. He said Buchanan had told him that a former CIA analyst, a man named Christopher Kit Green, who had been deeply embedded in the agency's remote viewing program in the 1970s, had allegedly engineered a backdoor into two consumer DNA databases. Not a government database, not a military database. It was 23andMe and Ancestry.com, the sites where you spit in a tube and mail it off to find out you're 14% Irish. Yeah, those two, the public ones that we all know that, I mean, I wasn't that surprised when I'm like, oh yeah, people are getting into that. It gets bad. We're gonna get into this. So the purpose, according to the claim, was to screen users for a specific genetic variance linked to non-human beings. Now, the government denies it. The companies deny it. And I want to be honest with you, this is an unverified claim from a secondhand source. But here's why I'm not dismissing it. Here's why this story, I think, really deserves a serious look. Because in March of 2025, 23andMe, as I'm sure a lot of you heard about, went bankrupt. The company that held the DNA of over 15 million Americans filed for Chapter 11. Their CEO resigned, and suddenly the most intimate data in existence, your genetic code, was sitting in federal bankruptcy court, up for auction to the highest bidder. 30 states sued to stop the sale. Nearly 2 million customers rushed to delete their data. A federal judge called the prospect of selling people's DNA to the highest bidder, quote, a scary proposition. And that's an understatement. Regeneron Pharmaceuticals won the initial auction for $256 million. But the states kept fighting. And eventually, 23andMe's own co founder bought the database back through a nonprofit for $305 million. But think about that window that was open there for a significant amount of time, from the bankruptcy filing to the final sale. Months of uncertainty, months where the legal ownership of 15 million people's genetic data was genuinely unclear. If you were a government agency that wanted access to that data and you wanted it quietly, that theoretically would have kind of been your moment. And right in the middle of that chaos, Lynn Buchanan's claim surfaces. And here's what I want to do today. I want to show you who Lynn Buchanan actually is. I want to show you the program he came from, and I want to show you the actual declassified documents from that program. Documents that are sitting on the CIA's own website right now, available to anyone who wants to read them. So I did a little perusing. And I want to ask you the question. I want to ask the question the CIA never wanted to answer. When the remote viewers they trained projected their minds into the void, when they sent their consciousness to Jupiter, to the moon, to Mars, to the location of the Ark of the Covenant, what exactly was looking back at them? Because I don't think they were accessing a psychic gift. I think they were opening a door. And the entities they found on the other side of that door are the same beings the government is now preparing to introduce to the world as extraterrestrials. So, to understand how serious this was, you have to understand how it started. So, let's go back to April 1972. A Columbia trained physicist named Russell Targ walks into a meeting with the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence, the branch that monitored nuclear weapons and biological warfare during the Cold War. He had a warning. The Soviets, he said, are not just building bigger missiles, they are experimenting with psychic phenomena. There are reports of a woman in Leningrad who can tear apart a dismembered frog's heart with her mind. Soviet laboratories are attempting to control the minds of remote humans and animals. The Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory is so alarmed, they have written a report warning that Russian psychic spies could eventually launch nuclear warheads through psychokinesis alone. The CIA's response was not to laugh. Their response was to ask, how much would it cost to find out if we could do that too? The answer was actually $874. That is the initial funding figure. Less than $1,000 to launch what would become a 23-year, multi-million-dollar classified intelligence program. Targ and his colleagues, physicist Harold Puthoff, set up their experiments at the Stanford Research Institute in Menlo Park, California. The protocol was simple and strict. A viewer would be placed in a room, isolated from all outside information. They would be given a sealed envelope. Inside the envelope was a target. Sometimes a set of geographic coordinates, sometimes just a description written on a 3x5 card. The viewer's job was to describe what they saw. No tricks, no hints, just a sealed envelope and a blank piece of paper. Almost immediately, the results were disturbing. Subjects began describing classified military locations thousands of miles away with accuracy that the CIA's own scientists couldn't explain. One man, a middle-aged businessman named Pat Price, a high-ranking Scientologist with zero intelligence background, became what SRI researchers called their psychic treasure. He would close his eyes, put on a pair of glasses, and describe the interior layouts of Soviet military facilities in the Ural Mountains. He identified code words. He noted architectural details. He even pointed out what he described as an unusually high ratio of women to men at one facility, but only at night. The CIA analyst monitoring Price was convinced he had found the perfect spy, a man who could gather intelligence anywhere in the world, completely invisible to the enemy. Then, in July 1975, Pat Price died in a Las Vegas hotel room. Official cause? Heart attack. He was 56 years old. He had been about to begin working directly with the CIA. The circumstances were considered suspicious by people inside the program, but nothing was ever proven. The program continued without him. The operation moved from the CIA to the Defense Intelligence Agency and established a formal unit at Fort Meade in Maryland. It ran under a rotating series of code names: Grill Flame, Center Lane, Sunstreak, and finally, Project Stargate. At its peak, it employed a small team of trained remote viewers who were tasked with real intelligence operations, finding hostages, locating crashed spy planes, tracking Soviet submarines, monitoring Scud missile movements. This was not a research project. This was an operational intelligence unit, and it ran for 23 years. Now, let's look at what they actually found, because this is where the story stops being about Cold War espionage and starts being about something much older and much stranger. So, remote viewer number 001 was Ingo Swann. He was born in Telluride, Colorado in 1933. Claimed to have had out of body experiences since the age of 3. And by the time he walked into the Stanford Research Institute in 1972, he had coined the term remote viewing himself. On the evening of April 27th, 1973, before the Pioneer 10 spacecraft had reached Jupiter, Swann was asked to remote view the planet. The document is in the CIA's reading room right now, and I'll put it up on the screen. It's a long string. If you're listening to the audio, you can go to the website, click on this episode script in the posts, and you'll be able to see what I'm reading. It's NSA RPD 96X00790R0001000400010-3. But you can scroll through all these because there's going to be more of them. So Swann described a gas giant with a hydrogen mantle, violent storms, a surface he couldn't land on, and then he said something that made the scientists in the room uncomfortable. He told them Jupiter had rings. Now, at the time, only Saturn was known to have rings. The scientists noted Swann's claim and moved on. 6 years later, in 1979, Voyager 1 flew past Jupiter and confirmed it. Jupiter has a ring system. Swann had described it before NASA discovered it. That is the version of this story that gets told in the mainstream. The rings, the Jupiter prediction, the clear, verifiable, scientifically interesting result. But Swann, he didn't stop at Jupiter. In his 1998 book, Penetration, The Question of Extraterrestrial and Human Telepathy, Swann described being recruited in 1975 by a secret agency, not the CIA, to remote view specific sites on the moon. He described massive artificial structures on the lunar surface. He described what appeared to be mining operations. And then he described the inhabitants. They were tall, humanoid, and they became aware of him. Swann wrote that while he was viewing them, he felt a sudden shift, a sense that the beings he was observing had turned their attention toward him. They knew he was there. He described the experience as deeply disturbing and said he pulled back immediately. And this is the detail that matters. The entities were not passive. They were not unaware. They were watching him back. Now let's jump to Joe McMonigal, who was a remote viewer number one for the Army's unit at Fort Meade. He had served in Vietnam, survived a helicopter crash, and had been recruited into the program in 1978. He was by any measure a serious man. And in 1979, he was handed a set of coordinates pointing to a location near the White Sea in the Soviet Union. He sat down, cleared his mind, and began to describe what he saw. He described a large warehouse about 100 yards from the water. Inside, he said, was a submarine unlike anything he had ever seen. He described its length. He described its double hull structure. He described slanted missile tubes, a design feature that had never been seen before. He measured it psychically. He wrote down his observations and submitted his report. The U.S. Navy laughed at him. Then, in September 1980, the Soviet Union launched the Typhoon-class submarine, the largest nuclear submarine ever built. 574 feet long, 48,000 tons fully submerged, double hull structure, slanted missile tubes, exactly what had been described. And McMonigal's his report was taken to the National Security Council. They had dismissed it. The submarine launched without incident. At his retirement from the Army in 1984, Joe received the Legion of Merit. The citation specifically referenced his work in the remote viewing program. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a matter of public record. Joe later said the program ended partly because of the stigma attached to it. And in his words, he said, everybody wanted to use it, but nobody wanted to be caught dead standing next to it. There's an automatic ridicule factor. Anybody associated with it could kiss their career goodbye. And now we're going to jump to one I believe we've talked about on the show a long time ago because it's an older declassified document. And it's the one I think about the most because this is one not about the Cold War intelligence. This one is about something else entirely. And again, this one available on the CIA's website. I encourage you to read it for yourself. It's another long one. It's on the screen now if you're watching. It will be in the notes for this post for this episode on the website. So on May 22nd, 1984, a remote viewer was brought into a session. The monitor handed them a sealed envelope. Inside the envelope was a 3x5 card. It read, "The planet Mars. Time of interest, approximately 1 million years BC. 1 million years before Christ. They were asking a human being to project their consciousness 1 million years in the past and across 140 million miles of space. The viewer began to describe what they saw. A dying planet, massive dust storms, the atmosphere failing, and structures enormous, humongous structures. An oblique view of a pyramid, a very large road, megalithic forms that the viewer struggled to find words for. And then the inhabitants." And I'm going to read the viewer's actual words from the declassified transcript because this is not my interpretation. This is literally what they said. Quote, "I just keep seeing very large people. They appear thin and tall, but very large. Wearing some kind of strange clothes." The viewer described an ancient race facing an existential catastrophe. Their environment was collapsing. They had built pyramid structures and underground warrens to shelter from savage storms. They were waiting for a group of their own people who had left on a mission to find a new home. And the viewer's words again, "There was a group or a party of them that went to find new place to live. It's like I'm getting all kinds of overwhelming input of the corruption of their environment. It's failing very rapidly, and this group went somewhere, like a long way, to find another place to live. And of those who remained, he said, they're hanging on while they look or wait for something to return. They're ancient people. They're dying. It's past their time or age. They're very philosophic about it. They're looking for a way to survive, and they just can't. So a tall, thin race, ancient, dying, waiting for a group of their own who left to find a new world. And I want you to hold that image in your mind because we'll come back to it. We're going to jump to 1988 now, 4 years after the Mars mission, under Operation Sunstreak. Remote viewer number 32 was given a sealed envelope with an unknown target. No coordinates, no description, just a target. The viewer began to describe what they perceived. A container. Inside the container, another container. Fashioned of wood, gold, and silver. Decorated with seraphim. Angels. Hidden underground in a Middle Eastern location, dark and wet. Surrounding buildings suggested the presence of mosque domes. Arabic speaking men dressed in white are in the area. The viewer described the object's purpose, said, quote, to bring a people together. It has something to do with ceremony, memory, homage, and the resurrection. And then they described what was protecting it. And again, I am reading directly from the CIA declassified document, which was declassified on August 8th of 2000. The target is protected by entities and can only be opened by those who are authorized to do so. This container cannot be opened until the time is deemed correct. And then he said this: individuals opening the container by prying or striking are destroyed by the container's protectors through the use of a power unknown to us. A power unknown to us. The CIA sent a psychic spy to find, if you haven't figured it out yet, the Ark of the Covenant. And what the viewer found was that the Ark is real, it is hidden, and it is guarded by entities wielding a power that the United States intelligence community, with all of its resources and technology, described as completely beyond their understanding. So let me show you the thread that runs through all of these sessions, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Ingo Swann views the moon. The beings he encountered become aware of his presence and turn their attention towards him. He withdraws. The Mars mission, an ancient race of tall, thin beings. Their world is dying. A group of them left to find a new home somewhere else. The ones who remained are waiting for them to return. The Ark of the Covenant, guarded by entities, a power unknown to us. In every significant session, the remote viewers were not passively watching a screen. They were entering a space that was already occupied, and the things occupying that space were aware of them. This is not the behavior of a planet. This is not the behavior of a historical artifact. This is not the behavior of intelligent, active spiritual entities. The official story is that the CIA shut down Project Stargate in 1995 because the American Institute for Research concluded it was producing no actionable intelligence. And that is technically true. That is what the report said. But consider this: you do not fund a program for 23 years, run hundreds of classified sessions, give people the Legion of Merit, and task your viewers with finding the Ark of the Covenant if you think it's a parlor trick. You just don't do that if you believe the results are meaningless. I don't actually think that the program ended. I just believe it went underground into what the intelligence community calls the unacknowledged special access programs. They're programs that do not appear in any budget, that are not briefed to Congress, that simply do not officially exist. The Stargate program was already classified as a special access program before it was officially terminated. That designation does not go away because a public report says the program is closed. And now, in 2026, one of the original Stargate viewers is claiming the CIA has been searching consumer DNA databases for alien human hybrid genetic markers. Think about what that claim actually implies. It implies that the intelligence community already knows that non human beings have been interbreeding with humans. It implies that this has been going on long enough and extensively enough that the genetic signature is detectable in a consumer DNA test. It implies that the aliens are not out there somewhere in the cosmos. They are here among us in small towns like in Colorado, and they're passing as Scandinavian. And it implies that the CIA is not trying to make first contact. They're trying to find the ones who are already here. So now I want to tell you what I actually believe is happening. Not the government's version, not the UFO community's version, the biblical version. Because the Bible has a framework for all of this, and it is the only framework that makes the entire picture make sense. The New Age community calls what the remote viewers did accessing higher consciousness. Now, I want to tell you what I actually believe is happening. Not the government's version, not the UFO community's version, the biblical version. Because the Bible has a framework for all of this, and is the only framework that makes the entire picture make sense. The New Age community calls what the remote viewers did as accessing higher consciousness. The government called it extrasensory perception. The researchers at Stanford called it anomalous cognition. But the Bible has a much older name for it. It's divination. Deuteronomy 18:10 through 12 is explicit. It lists consulting mediums, practicing sorcery, seeking omens, and communicating with the dead as abominations. Not because these things don't work, but because of what you are actually contacting when you do them. The CIA did not train its viewers to access a neutral psychic frequency. They trained them to project their consciousness out of their bodies and into the spiritual realm. And the spiritual realm is not empty, it is populated, and the inhabitants are not benevolent. Ephesians 6:12 says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." Principalities, powers, rulers of darkness. This is Paul describing a hierarchy of intelligent, organized, malevolent spiritual beings who operate in the unseen realm. In the unseen realm. The exact realm the CIA was training people to enter. When Ingo Swann viewed the moon and the beings turned to look back at him, he was not encountering extraterrestrials. He was encountering principalities that became aware of a human consciousness entering their domain. When the viewers described the tall, thin beings on Mars waiting for their people to return, they were not viewing a historical record of an ancient alien civilization. They were receiving a carefully constructed deception, a narrative fed to them by spiritual entities whose entire purpose is to deceive. The ancient race that seeded humanity's story is not new. It is one of the oldest lies in the enemy's playbook. It is the lie that says humanity was created by beings other than God. It is the lie that will be used to explain away the rapture, to introduce the Antichrist, and to unite the world under a false spiritual authority. When Remote Viewer 32 described the Ark of the Covenant and the entities guarding it with a power unknown to us, they were seeing something real. The Ark is real, the power is real, but the entities guarding it are not neutral custodians. They are the same spiritual forces that have always surrounded the most powerful objects in the biblical narrative. And the alien DNA claim? Genesis 6. As we've talked about a bunch on this show, the Nephilim, the sons of God taking the daughters of men, the mixing of human and non-human bloodlines. This is not a new story. It's the oldest story in the enemy's arsenal, and it's being repackaged for a scientific age. Instead of fallen angels interbreeding with humans, we now have genetic variants linked to non-human beings detectable in 23andMe tests. Same story, new language. The CIA spent millions of dollars and 23 years trying to weaponize the demonic realm. They thought they could control it. They thought they could use it to spy on the Russians, to find the Ark of the Covenant, to understand what ancient Mars looked like. They were wrong. They can't control the demonic. You can only open a door and invite what's there in. And I believe that is exactly what they did. The entities they contacted in those sessions are the same entities driving the current UFO disclosure movement. They are the same entities behind the alien abduction phenomenon. They are the same entities behind the channeling movement. The same ones presenting themselves as the Nordics in a Colorado diner. They are preparing the world for a grand deception, a narrative that humanity was seeded by alien creators, that we have their DNA in our bloodlines, and that these beings are returning to guide us into the next stage of our evolution. Do not fall for it. The spiritual war is real. It has been real since the book of Genesis, and the government, whether they know it or not, has been one of the most active participants in it for the last 50 years. So that's it. I mean, if you want to read more of the documents I referenced today, they're all publicly available in the CIA's reading room at cia.gov. I'll put them up on the screen. You can find them on the website. The Ark of the Covenant session as well. You can go read all those. Don't take my word for it. Go check all this stuff out because it's declassified documents. I just pulled from it. And if this episode opened up something for you, if you're asking questions that you weren't asking before, I want to hear from you. You can head over to crypticaccounts.com. You can contact me directly at crypticapodcast@gmail.com. Post about it in the community, on the forums, on the website. Reach out. Those are the best ways. Obviously, for those of you who listen regularly, I'm not always the best at catching the comments on YouTube. Sometimes it tells me about them, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's weeks before I see them and get to it. I'm not ignoring you. I probably just didn't know what happened. So I'm much more responsive, especially to email. If you have anything to add, as always, if you've got experiences that you want to talk about, would love to hear from you. Open to maybe interviewing people on the show that want to talk about this kind of stuff. But yeah, so if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who is deep in the UFO rabbit hole, someone who is being drawn towards the ancient aliens narrative, someone who is looking for answers at all the wrong places, share this episode with them because the answers they're looking for are not in declassified CIA documents. It's in the Word of God. So until next time, keep your eyes open, stay in the Word, and do not open doors you cannot close. I'll see you next week.
Cryptic Accounts is a fan-funded show brought to you by you. Please visit crypticaccounts.com to find out how you can help support the show.